I spent 20 years working 3 jobs, wearing old shoes and skipping meals, just to make sure my son had the best education. I thought he was my pride and joy. But on his wedding day, the happiest day of his life, he pulled me aside and whispered, "Mom, you're too poor and embarrassing for my new family. Please sit in the back. Or just leave." My heart didn't just break. It turned to ice. He didn't know that the hospital he just started working at, the luxury car he was driving, and the very house he was moving into, all belonged to the anonymous investor he feared so much. He thought I was a nobody. But today, he's going to find out I'm the woman who can take it all away. Welcome to Revenge in Sight. This is the story of the silent billionaire mother. The clock at the diner always seemed to move slower when Martha's feet were throbbing. For 20 years, she had lived her life by the rhythm of a mop hitting a floor and a coffee pot hitting a cup. Martha was a woman who knew the exact weight of $1 and the true cost of a dream. When Ethan's father passed away, he left behind nothing but a mountain of debt and a 5-year-old boy with eyes full of questions. Martha didn't crumble. She transformed into a machine of pure survival. By day, she was the janitor at St. Jude's High School. She would push a heavy gray bucket through the empty hallways, the squeak of the wheels echoing in the silence. She scrubbed the floors until her knees were raw, and her hands were permanently stained with the smell of industrial bleach. When the final bell rang, she didn't go home. She went to her second job at the Sunrise Diner. There, she wore a faded yellow apron and a forced smile, serving plates of greasy eggs to truck drivers who didn't know her name. She survived on the leftovers they left behind, saving every nickel and dime into a rusted tin can hidden under her floorboards. But the work didn't end at midnight. In the silent hours of the early morning, while Ethan slept in their cramped one-bedroom apartment, Martha sat under a single dim bulb, sewing clothes for the wealthy families in the hills. Her fingers were often pricked and bleeding. Her eyes burned from the strain, but she never stopped. She wore the same gray winter coat for 15 years, its edges frayed, its lining torn. She never once went on a vacation. She never bought a piece of jewelry. And she never complained. "Mom, why don't you buy new shoes?" Ethan would ask when he was 10. Martha would just laugh and pull him close. "These shoes have miles of love in them, Ethan. You just focus on your books. One day you'll be a great doctor. And that will be my reward." She believed it with every fiber of her being. She watched with tears of joy as Ethan graduated at the top of his class from the most prestigious medical school in the country. She had sold her only heirloom, her mother's wedding ring, just to pay for his final residency fees. She was the silent wind beneath his wings, always in the background, unaware that the son she had raised was slowly starting to despise the hands that had fed him. As Ethan's career as a surgeon began to skyrocket, a strange and painful distance began to grow between him and his mother. It started with missed phone calls. "I'm busy at the hospital, Mom," he would say, his voice sounding sharp and annoyed. Then, it became the embarrassment. Martha would visit his high-tech office with a container of his favorite home-cooked stew, only for Ethan to usher her out into the hallway, his eyes darting around to see if any of his wealthy colleagues were watching. He looked at her worn-out dress and her calloused hands with a mixture of pity and shame. Then came Tiffany. Tiffany was the daughter of a legendary real estate mogul, a woman who had never known the sting of a cold room or the hunger of a skipped meal. She was draped in designer silk and smelled of expensive perfume. When Ethan brought her to meet Martha, Tiffany didn't even step inside the apartment. She stood in the doorway, holding her designer bag as if the air in the room was contaminated. "Oh, Ethan," she whispered, not realizing Martha could hear her. "Is this where you actually grew up?" Ethan didn't defend his mother. He just looked at the peeling wallpaper and lowered his head. The wedding preparations were a nightmare for Martha. Every time she tried to help, Ethan would push her away. "Mom, Tiffany's family is very high society," he said one evening, his tone cold and clinical. "They value appearances above everything. Tiffany's mother thinks your janitor stories are a bit unrefined. Maybe it's better if you don't talk much at the wedding. We want the event to be perfect, and frankly, you don't fit the image we're trying to build." Martha felt a sharp prick of pain in her chest, much worse than the ache in her knees. She had spent 20 years erasing herself so he could shine, and now, he was finishing the job. "I understand, Ethan," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I just want you to be happy." But Ethan wasn't looking for her happiness. He was looking for a way to erase his past. He had become a man who loved the mirror and hated the roots that had planted him. He didn't see the silent storm brewing in Martha's heart, a storm that was born from 20 years of silence and was about to break. The wedding day was a spectacle of wealth that the city would talk about for years. It was held at the Grand Country Club, a place where the grass was trimmed with surgical precision and the air smelled of imported lilies. A professional harpist played softly as the elite of the city arrived in their Ferraris and Bentleys. Martha arrived in a dress she had spent 6 months sewing by hand, a modest lace gown that she thought looked elegant. But as she stepped onto the marble floors, she felt like a speck of dust in a palace of gold. She walked toward the front row, the seat reserved for the mother of the groom. But before she could sit, Tiffany's mother, a woman draped in diamonds and arrogance, blocked her path. "Oh, I'm sorry, dear," the woman said with a fake, razor-sharp smile. "These seats are for family and honored guests. The staff and distant relatives are sitting in the back. I'm sure you'll be much more comfortable there, near the kitchen exit." Martha looked for Ethan. He was standing near the altar, looking like a prince in his custom tuxedo. He saw her. He saw the way his mother-in-law was talking to her. But he didn't move. Instead, he walked over, pulled Martha behind a large floral arrangement, and whispered the words that would haunt her forever. "Mom, please, look at you. You're embarrassing me. You look like a servant in that dress. Tiffany's father is a billionaire. His business partners are here. I can't have them knowing my mother was a janitor. Go sit in the very back row, behind the pillars. Or better yet, just go home. I'll tell everyone you were sick. Just stay out of my way today." Martha stood there, surrounded by the scent of 10,000 flowers, and felt the final thread of her love for her son snap. She didn't argue. She didn't make a scene. She simply turned around and walked to the very last row, sitting in the shadows where the waiters stood. She watched as the son she had starved herself for smiled and laughed with a family that treated her like trash. She watched the ceremony, her face a mask of cold stone. Ethan thought he had successfully hidden his embarrassing past. He had no idea that he had just turned his greatest supporter into his most dangerous enemy. 1 week after the wedding, Martha was sitting in her small, quiet apartment. She was drinking a cup of tea, her mind clear for the first time in years. The silence was broken by a loud, impatient knock on the door. It was Ethan and Tiffany. They didn't come to thank her for the wedding gift. They didn't come to ask how she was. They came with a legal envelope and a look of cold determination. "Mom, we need to talk," Ethan said, stepping into the cramped room without taking off his sunglasses. Tiffany stood by the door, pulling her silk scarf over her nose as if the apartment smelled of poverty. Tiffany's father is expanding his real estate empire. He's buying this entire block to build a luxury hotel. Every building on this street is being demolished. Martha looked at the paper Ethan handed her. It was an eviction notice. "But Ethan, I've lived here for 20 years. This is the only home I've ever known. Your father's things are here. Where am I supposed to go?" "Mom, be realistic," Ethan sighed. sounding like a weary businessman dealing with a difficult client. "We need the capital from this development to buy our new estate in the hills. It's $1 million investment. You're just renting. You don't have any rights here. I've found a small basement room for you across town. It's cheap, and it's near the bus line. It suits your lifestyle. Much better than this dump." Tiffany let out a small mocking laugh. "Honestly, Martha, you should be happy. You're finally getting out of this eyesore. Ethan is a respected surgeon now. He can't have his mother living in a place where people might see her. It's bad for our social standing." Martha looked at her son. The boy she had skipped meals for. The boy whose fever she had watched over for countless nights. "You're taking my home, Ethan? So you can buy a bigger one for yourself." "It's just business, Mom," Ethan said, heading for the door. "I have a reputation to maintain now. Just be out by the 30th. Don't make this difficult." They left, the scent of Tiffany's expensive perfume lingering like a poisonous cloud. Martha looked at the notice, and then at her calloused hands. The sacrificial lamb was gone. The billionaire was about to wake up. What Ethan and Tiffany didn't know was that Martha had a secret that had been growing in the shadows for over a decade. 10 years ago, when Martha was waitressing at the Sunrise Diner, she had looked after an elderly regular named Mr. Gable. He was a lonely, quiet man with no family. For years, Martha was the only person who treated him like a human being, always saving him the best piece of pie and listening to his stories of the old days. When Mr. Gable passed away, he left Martha everything. He wasn't just a lonely man. He was a reclusive tech investor with a massive, untouched portfolio of blue-chip stocks. Martha was suddenly worth millions. But she never spent a cent. She had been afraid that wealth would spoil Ethan, so she kept her secret, letting the money grow and grow in a silent, offshore trust. She continued to work her 3 jobs, watching her son grow, waiting for the day he would become a man of character. But now, she realized that the money she had saved to protect him was the very weapon she needed to destroy the monster he had become. She was the anonymous investor who had funded the hospital's new surgical wing. She was the silent partner who owned the land Ethan's new mansion was being built on. And she was the major shareholder in Tiffany's father's real estate firm, Miller International. Martha picked up her old, cracked phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. "David? It's Martha Sterling. Yes, the time has come. I want a full forensic audit of the hospital's payroll. Then, I want you to exercise the buyback clause on the hillside property. And most importantly, call an emergency board meeting at Miller International. My son thinks I'm a nobody. It's time he meets his boss." Martha stood up, her back straighter than it had been in 20 years. She went to her closet and pulled out a suit she had bought in secret but never wore. It was charcoal gray, tailored perfectly, and cost more than Ethan's car. She looked in the mirror. The janitor was gone. The billionaire mother had arrived, and she was coming for everything he loved. Tiffany's father, Mr. Miller, was in a state of absolute sweating panic. His real estate firm, the empire he had built on arrogance and debt, was facing a sudden hostile takeover by their mysterious silent partner. He had scrambled to call an emergency meeting, demanding that Ethan and Tiffany be there to show a united family front to the investor. He thought the presence of a respected surgeon would make the firm look more stable. "When this investor walks in, I want you both to stand up and smile," Mr. Miller warned, his hands shaking as he adjusted his tie. "Our entire future depends on this person's mercy. If they pull their funding, we lose the hotel, we lose the mansion, we lose everything. Do you understand?" Ethan adjusted his expensive cufflinks, looking bored. "Don't worry, sir. I know how to handle these people. They're just businessmen. They want money. We'll show them we're the best investment they ever made." The double doors of the boardroom swung open with a heavy, thunderous sound. A woman walked in, flanked by 3 of the city's most expensive lawyers. She was wearing a tailored suit, her silver hair styled in a sharp, elegant bob. She walked with the confidence of a woman who owned the ground she stepped on. Ethan and Tiffany stood up, their mouths hanging open. "Mom? What is this?" Ethan stammered, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. "What are you doing here? I told you to stay in the basement. You're going to ruin my father-in-law's meeting. Get out before I have security throw you out." Tiffany's father looked at Ethan, then at Martha, then back at Ethan. You know her?" "Ethan, you idiot. This is the woman who owns 49% of this company. This is Martha Sterling." Martha sat at the head of the long mahogany table, crossing her legs with a slow, deliberate grace. She looked at her son, not with anger, but with a chilling indifference that was far more terrifying than a scream. "Actually, Ethan, I own much more than that. I own the hospital where you work. I own the ground your house sits on. And today, I've decided that you're a very, very poor investment." The strike was swift, surgical, and utterly merciless. Martha's lawyers laid out the documents on the table. "As of 9 a.m. this morning, the Sterling Trust has withdrawn all financial support from the City General Hospital," Martha's lawyer announced. Ethan's phone chimed. He looked at the screen. It was an email notifying him of his immediate termination. "Because your medical license was funded by a Trust 1 control," Martha said coldly, "and because of your embarrassing lack of integrity, I've initiated an ethics review. You're no longer a doctor, Ethan. You're just a man with a lot of debt." Martha addressed Mr. Miller. "I am exercising the buyback clause on the Hillside estate," she said, her voice like cold steel cutting through the room. "The land belongs to me, which means Ethan and Tiffany have 48 hours to remove their belongings before the locks are changed. Since they wanted me in a basement, I'm sure they'll find a way to enjoy the street." Tiffany's father looked at his daughter and Ethan with pure, unadulterated rage. "You did this? You insulted the woman who holds our lives in her hands? You called her poor? Get out. Both of you. The wedding is over. The family is over." The high society world Ethan had traded his mother for disintegrated in a matter of minutes. Tiffany, seeing that her husband was now a penniless, disgraced man, turned on him like a viper. "I never loved you anyway," she screamed in the hallway, her voice echoing through the office. "I only married you because I thought you were a rising star. You're just a pathetic, dirty little boy. Stay away from me." By the end of the day, Ethan was standing on the sidewalk with 2 suitcases, his luxury car already being towed away because it was registered to Martha's holding company. He had nothing. No job, no wife, no house, and no mother. He had traded a diamond for a piece of glass, and now he was left with nothing but the shards. 1 month later, Martha was sitting on the balcony of her new, glass-walled penthouse overlooking the city. She was no longer wearing the gray coat. She was surrounded by the scent of fresh orchids and the quiet, peaceful hum of a life she had finally earned for herself. The doorbell rang. Her security guard informed her that Ethan was downstairs, begging for a moment of her time. Martha sighed and told them to let him up. Ethan entered the room, looking like a ghost. His expensive suit was wrinkled and stained, his hair was messy, and his eyes were red from crying. He fell to his knees in front of her, right there on the expensive marble floor. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I was blind. I was arrogant. I let Tiffany and her family get into my head. Please, just give me one more chance. I'll do anything. I'll work as a janitor in your building. Just don't leave me with nothing." Martha looked down at him, the same way he had looked down at her at the wedding. She felt a small flicker of sadness, But the mother who had sacrificed everything for him had died at that wedding. "I forgave you the moment I walked to the back of that wedding chapel, Ethan," she said softly, her voice echoing in the vast room. "But forgiveness doesn't mean I will let you back into my life. You told me I was embarrassing. Now, you're just a stranger." "But Mom, I have nothing. I'm living in a shelter." "Then you'll learn what I learned 20 years ago, Ethan. You'll learn the value of $1. You'll learn how to work with your hands. And maybe, if you're lucky, you'll learn how to be a human being. I've donated your childhood apartment to a charity for single mothers. I've started a scholarship for students who actually respect their parents. As for you, I've left a small amount in a trust that will pay for a basic room, as long as you maintain a steady job. It's more than you gave me." Martha stood up, her silver cane clicking on the floor as she walked toward the window. She watched the sunset, finally free from the burden of an ungrateful son. She had her wealth, she had her dignity, and she had the silence she had earned through 20 years of noise. Martha was finally truly home. Thank you for watching this story of sacrifice and sweet justice on Revenge Insight. Martha's story is a powerful reminder that the people who sacrifice the most for us are the ones we should honor above all. What did you think of Martha's revenge? Was she too cold? Or did Ethan get exactly what he deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe that gratitude and integrity are worth more than gold, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more epic revenge tales. Stay wise, stay strong, and never forget those who helped you climb. Until next time.